Ethan Caldwell wasn't just another name in the business world. At 42, he was a self-made billionaire who had climbed his way to the top with nothing but grit and determination. He owned tech companies that changed how people lived, invested in ideas that grew into global phenomena, and lived a life most could only dream of. But despite all the money, power, and success, there was something missing. A deep, aching void inside him that no amount of wealth could ever fill. 10 years ago, Ethan lost the love of his life in a tragic accident. She wasn't just someone he cared about. She was the center of his universe. Her laughter lit up even the darkest days. Her presence made every moment feel alive, and her voice, oh, her voice was like magic. She loved music more than anything else. It didn't matter if it was a sunny afternoon or a quiet evening at home. She would sing without thinking twice. One song in particular stood out among the rest. It was their song. The melody held so much meaning for them that it became their anthem, their secret code, their connection to each other. After she passed away, Ethan couldn't bear to listen to it anymore. Every note reminded him of what he'd lost. So he pushed it far away, burying it deep within his memories. But as time went on, those memories began creeping back. They came uninvited, showing up in little things, a whiff of her favorite perfume, a snippet of a tune playing softly in the background, or the sight of wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. These moments weren't painful exactly, but they were bittersweet reminders of the life they once shared. Still, Ethan tried his best to keep moving forward. Work became his escape. Deals, meetings, and projects consumed his days, leaving little room for anything else. One evening, after wrapping up yet another high-stakes deal, Ethan decided to take a break from the chaos of his routine. He remembered a small cafe on the outskirts of New York City, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. She used to visit this place before they met, always raving about its charm and cozy atmosphere. Something about it felt right tonight. Maybe it was nostalgia pulling him there, or maybe it was just the need for a change of scenery. Whatever it was, Ethan found himself walking through the door of the cafe, expecting nothing more than a cup of coffee and some peace. The cafe was exactly as he imagined it would be, warm, inviting, and full of character. Soft yellow lights hung from wooden beams, casting a golden glow over mismatched furniture. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with old novels and poetry collections. A small stage stood in one corner, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Ethan chose a table by the window, where he could watch the city lights flicker outside while sipping his black coffee. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails and messages, trying to distract himself from the heaviness in his chest. As dinner service wound down, the hum of conversation in the cafe grew quieter. That's when Ethan noticed her, a young waitress clearing tables nearby. She looked ordinary enough, dressed in the cafe's simple uniform, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. But there was something about her demeanor, a quiet confidence, that caught his attention. When she stepped onto the stage and picked up an acoustic guitar, the entire room seemed to pause. "This next song," she said softly, adjusting the microphone, "is dedicated to someone I once knew. It reminds me of simpler times." And then she began to sing. Ethan froze. His fingers stopped scrolling mid-motion, his coffee forgotten on the table. The melody was unmistakable. It was their song. The same tune that had been etched into his soul for years. Her voice was hauntingly beautiful, carrying the weight of emotion with every word. It wasn't polished or rehearsed, it was raw, honest, and deeply personal. As she sang, Ethan felt like the world around him melted away. Memories rushed back in waves, the way he used to hold her close as they danced to this song, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the way she whispered the lyrics into his ear late at night. For a fleeting moment, it felt like she was right there beside him again. When the last note faded, polite applause rippled through the room. But Ethan sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Who was this woman? How did she know the song that meant so much to him? And why did her voice sound so eerily familiar? He couldn't let it go. This wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. There had to be a reason, a story behind it all. Determined to find answers, Ethan lingered in the cafe long after most patrons had left. When the waitress returned to clear his table, he finally worked up the courage to speak. "That song you sang earlier," he started, his voice hesitant. "It's personal to me. Where did you learn it?" She paused, holding a tray of dishes against her hip. Her expression shifted slightly, as though she recognized something in his tone. "It's a family favorite," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "My grandmother used to sing it all the time when I was growing up. She said it reminded her of my grandfather. They met because of that song." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Family favorite? Grandparents? Could there really be a connection between this stranger and the woman he had loved so deeply? Before he could stop himself, he blurted out, "Would you mind telling me more about your grandmother sometime, over coffee maybe?" To his surprise, she smiled and nodded. "Sure, I'd like that." Little did Ethan know this simple conversation would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. The next day, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the waitress and her song. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, the way her voice had filled the cafe, how it had stirred emotions he'd buried years ago. It wasn't just the melody that haunted him. It was the connection. That song wasn't common. It wasn't something you heard on the radio or stumbled across by accident. Yet here was this young woman, singing it as if it were second nature to her. And then there was what she said about her grandmother. A family favorite. Her grandparents meeting because of the song. The pieces didn't quite fit yet, but Ethan could feel they were close. He decided to visit the cafe again that evening, hoping to see her. This time he came without his phone, without distractions, ready to focus entirely on what might unfold. When he walked in, the same warm glow greeted him, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around him like a hug. He spotted her almost immediately. She was behind the counter, chatting with a customer while pouring steaming liquid into a cup. There was an ease about her, a kind of quiet confidence that made people gravitate toward her. Ethan waited patiently until she finished serving and approached his table. "Hey," she said with a small smile, recognizing him from the night before. "You're back." "I am," Ethan replied, returning her smile. "I couldn't stay away after hearing you sing last night. You have an incredible voice." She tilted her head slightly, looking both pleased and a little embarrassed. "Thanks. I don't usually perform, but sometimes I can't help myself. Music has always been a big part of my life." Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath. "About that song, Wildflower Serenade. You mentioned your grandmother used to sing it. Can you tell me more about her?" Her expression softened as though she were stepping into a memory. "My grandma was amazing. She passed away recently and I still miss her every day. She loved music. It was her escape, her joy. She used to sit me down when I was little and teach me songs she grew up with. That one, Wildflower Serenade, was special to her. She said it reminded her of my grandpa. They met at a dance, and he asked her to join him on the floor when that song started playing." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. A dance? The same lyrics, the same story? It was too much of a coincidence, but instead of jumping to conclusions, he listened intently, letting her continue. "She told me that song changed everything for them. It was the beginning of their love story. After Grandpa died, she kept singing it, not out of sadness, but because it reminded her of the happiest days of her life." Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't say anything for a moment, letting her words sink in. Then carefully he asked, "Do you think your grandma ever talked about sharing that song with anyone else? Or maybe someone passing it along to her?" She frowned, thinking hard. "Not really. Well, except—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "There was one thing. She used to write letters to her daughter, my mom, and in some of them she mentioned teaching her songs from her youth. My mom wasn't as into music though, so I'm not sure how much stuck. Why do you ask? Do you know the song too? Ethan hesitated. How could he explain this without sounding crazy? Finally, he settled on honesty. It's complicated, that song. It meant a lot to someone very important to me. Someone I lost. Hearing you sing it last night, it brought back memories I hadn't thought about in years. Her eyes widened slightly, understanding flickering across her face. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. No, it's okay, Ethan assured her quickly. Actually, I'm grateful. It's like hearing it again helped me remember things I'd forgotten. Things I need to hold on to. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging between them. Then she spoke, her voice gentle. If you want, I can show you some of my grandma's stuff. She left behind boxes of old photos and journals. Maybe there's something in there that'll make sense of all this. Ethan blinked, surprised by her offer. You'd do that? Sure, she said with a shrug. If it helps you figure out why this song connects us, then yeah. Plus, going through her things makes me feel closer to her. It's nice to share that with someone who understands. And just like that, they agreed to meet the following weekend. Ethan left the cafe feeling lighter than he had in years. For the first time since losing the person he loved most, he felt like he was on the verge of discovering something profound, something that might bring clarity to the emptiness he'd carried for so long. When Saturday arrived, Ethan drove to the address she'd given him, a modest house nestled in a quiet suburb. The front yard was tidy, with flower pots lining the porch and wind chimes tinkling softly in the breeze. She answered the door with a warm smile, ushering him inside. The living room was cozy, filled with mismatched furniture and shelves crammed with books and trinkets. In the center of it all sat several cardboard boxes, their contents spilling out onto the floor. This is everything, she said, gesturing to the piles of papers, photographs, and keepsakes. I haven't gone through it all yet, but I figured we could start digging together. For hours, they sifted through the treasures of a life well lived. There were black and white photos of her grandmother as a young woman, standing beside a man who must have been her grandfather. Their smiles radiated happiness, the kind that comes from knowing you found your person. There were handwritten letters, yellowed with age, and programs from concerts and dances she'd attended decades ago. And then, tucked inside a leather-bound journal, they found it, a page titled Songs That Shaped My Life. Ethan's hands trembled as he scanned the list. Near the top, written in delicate cursive, was the title, Wildflower Serenade. Below it, her grandmother had scribbled a note. This song reminds me of my own love story, and the ones that came before mine. What does that mean? She whispered, reading over his shoulder. The ones that came before mine? Ethan didn't answer right away. His mind was racing, piecing together fragments of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed. Slowly, he turned to her. I think your grandmother might have been connected to someone I loved very deeply. Someone who cherished this song as much as she did. Her eyes widened. Are you saying? I'm not sure yet, Ethan admitted. But I think we're closer to finding out than I ever imagined. As they continued exploring the boxes, Ethan felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. Whatever answers lay hidden in these pages, he knew they would change everything for both of them. By now, Ethan was fully immersed in the mystery. The more they dug through the boxes, the more he felt like he was unraveling a story that had been waiting years to be told. Each photograph, each letter, each scribbled note seemed to hold a clue, a thread connecting two lives separated by time but bound together by something deeper. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about him or the waitress. It was about something bigger, something timeless. They spent the entire afternoon, surrounded by the remnants of a life lived with passion and purpose. The waitress, let's call her Clara, was as curious as Ethan, though her curiosity stemmed from a different place. For her, this was a chance to know her grandmother better, to piece together fragments of a woman she'd only known through stories. For Ethan, it was a journey back to a love he thought he'd lost forever. Together, they found themselves drawn into a shared quest, one that neither of them could have predicted. As they sifted through old photographs, Ethan paused at one particular image. It showed Clara's grandmother standing beside another woman, who looked strikingly familiar. Her smile, her posture, even the way she held her head, it was uncanny. Ethan stared at the photo, his heart pounding. "Do you recognize her?" he asked, holding it up for Clara to see. Clara squinted, leaning closer. "No, I don't think so. She doesn't look like anyone in my family." Ethan swallowed hard. "She looks like someone I used to love. Someone very important to me." Clara's eyes widened. "Wait, you mean—" "I'm not sure yet," Ethan said quickly, trying to steady his voice. "But there's definitely a resemblance. Maybe your grandmother knew her, or maybe—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. The idea forming in his mind was too wild, too impossible to voice out loud. Clara reached for the photo, studying it intently. If that's true, then this is more than just a coincidence. There's got to be a reason why our paths crossed like this. Ethan nodded, his thoughts swirling. "I agree. And I think the answers are here somewhere. We just have to keep looking." The next item they uncovered was a stack of cassette tapes, neatly labeled in delicate handwriting. Most of them were recordings of classical music or old radio shows, but one stood out. "My Songs, 1965 Clara picked it up, turning it over in her hands. "Do you think these are recordings of my grandma singing?" "It's possible," Ethan replied, his pulse quickening. "Let's find out." They rummaged through the room until they located an old tape player tucked away in a closet. Dusting it off, Clara inserted the cassette and pressed play. At first, there was only static, but then a voice emerged, clear, warm, and achingly familiar. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. It was unmistakable. The voice on the tape sounded almost identical to the one he had loved so deeply. Clara glanced at him, her expression a mix of awe and confusion. "Is that—" "Yes," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "It sounds exactly like As the song played, Ethan closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. It was Wildflower Serenade, the same tune that had brought them together in the cafe, but hearing it now, sung by Clara's grandmother, felt like stepping into a dream. The lyrics carried a weight he hadn't noticed before, as if they were speaking directly to him across decades. When the song ended, neither of them spoke for a long moment. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the tape player. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "This can't be random. There has to be a connection between your person and my grandma, but what is it?" Ethan shook his head, still processing everything. "I don't know, but I think we need to go deeper. Maybe visit the places she talked about in her letters. See if we can trace her footsteps." Clara nodded, her determination matching his. "Okay, let's do it." Over the next few days, they pored over every detail they could find in the journals and letters. One entry caught their attention, a mention of a small town where Clara's grandmother had spent part of her childhood. According to the journal, it was a place filled with memories, both happy and bittersweet. Ethan suggested they visit, hoping to uncover more clues. Clara agreed, eager to learn more about the woman who had shaped so much of her own life. Trip took them to a quaint little town nestled in the countryside. The streets were lined with charming brick buildings, and the air smelled of fresh hay and blooming flowers. Everything about the place felt nostalgic, like stepping into a postcard from another era. They started their search at the local library, where an elderly librarian recognized Clara's grandmother's name immediately. "Oh, Evelyn," the librarian exclaimed, her face lighting up. "She used to volunteer here when she was younger. Always had her nose buried in a book or humming some tune under her breath." Ethan exchanged a glance with Clara. Evelyn must have been Clara's grandmother's name. "Did she ever talk about anyone special to her?" Ethan asked carefully. The librarian thought for a moment. "Well, there was someone, a girl named Rose. They were inseparable during their school years. Both loved music, always performing at local events. Tragically, Rose passed away young. Car accident, I think. Broke Evelyn's heart. Ethan's stomach dropped. A car accident, just like the one that had taken the person he loved most. Could it really be the same story? Was Rose the woman he had spent years mourning? Do you know anything else about Rose? Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. The librarian frowned. Not much, but I remember Evelyn mentioning once that Rose had a daughter. Said it gave her comfort to know Rose's legacy lived on. Ethan's mind raced. If Rose had a daughter and if Evelyn had stayed connected to her family somehow, then maybe the ties between their lives ran deeper than either of them realized. Determined to find answers, they visited the town's historical society, where they discovered archived newspapers from decades past. Among them was an obituary for Rose accompanied by a photo. Ethan's heart stopped. It was her, the woman he had loved. The resemblance was undeniable. Beside the article was a brief mention of her surviving family, including a young child. That's it? Ethan murmured, his voice thick with emotion. That's how it all connects. Your grandmother must have stayed close to Rose's family after she died. That's why she knew the song. Why it meant so much to her. Clara stared at the article, tears welling up in her eyes. So my grandma, she kept her memory alive? Ethan nodded, his own eyes glistening. And now you're doing the same. Without even realizing it, you've carried her legacy forward. For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of peace. The emptiness inside him didn't disappear completely, but it softened, tempered by the knowledge that love never truly vanishes. It transforms, evolves, and finds new ways to exist in the world. As they left the historical society, hand in hand, Ethan knew one thing for certain. This journey wasn't just about rediscovering the past. It was about building a future. One, rooted in connection, healing, and hope. Ethan and Clara returned to the city with their heads spinning from everything they'd uncovered. The trip to the small town had been more than just a search for answers. It was like piecing together fragments of a puzzle that spanned generations. Every new detail brought them closer to understanding how intertwined their lives truly were. But as much as Ethan felt a sense of clarity, he also grappled with the weight of what he'd learned. This wasn't just about him or Clara anymore. It was about honoring the people who had come before them, the ones whose love stories had shaped their own. Back in the cafe where it all began, Ethan found himself sitting at the same table by the window. He couldn't help but smile when he noticed Clara setting up her guitar on the tiny stage again. She caught his eye and gave him a small wave before turning to address the growing crowd. This next song, she said softly into the microphone, is dedicated to two extraordinary women who taught me the power of love and legacy. As Clara started playing Wildflower Serenade, Ethan closed his eyes and let the melody carry him away. For the first time since losing the person he loved most, he didn't feel consumed by grief. Instead, he felt gratitude for the memories they shared, for the way her spirit lived on through others, and for the chance to connect with someone like Clara. When the final note faded, the room erupted in applause, but Ethan stayed seated, lost in thought. Afterward, Clara joined him at the table, pulling up a chair. "You okay?" she asked gently, noticing the distant look in his eyes. "I'm fine," Ethan replied, though his voice betrayed the depth of his emotions. "Better than fine, actually. I never expected any of this. I came here thinking I'd find closure, but instead I've found so much more." Clara tilted her head, studying him curiously. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I think I've been carrying around this idea that love is something fragile, that once it's gone forever. But now I see that's not true. Love doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It becomes part of who we are, and sometimes it even connects us to people we never imagined meeting." Clara smiled faintly, nodding in agreement. "That's exactly how I feel about my grandma. Even though she's not here anymore, I can still hear her voice in my mind. And now, knowing that her life touched yours in such a profound way, it makes me feel like she's still guiding me somehow." For a while, they sat in silence, letting the weight of their discovery settle between them. Then Ethan spoke again, his tone thoughtful. "Do you think your grandma knew? About the connection between our families, I mean?" Clara shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe she just followed her heart, trusting that the things that mattered most would find their way back to her. Either way, I think it's beautiful." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Beautiful was the perfect word for it. What had started as a chance encounter in a quiet cafe had blossomed into something neither of them could have anticipated. It wasn't just about uncovering secrets from the past. It was about healing old wounds and finding purpose in unexpected places. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Clara threw themselves into creating something meaningful out of what they'd discovered. They decided to establish a foundation dedicated to supporting aspiring musicians, people who used music to tell their stories, heal their hearts, and bring communities together. Naming it after Wildflower Serenade felt fitting, as the song had become a symbol of resilience, connection, and enduring love. Planning the foundation gave Ethan a renewed sense of purpose. For years, he'd poured his energy into building wealth, but now he realized there was a deeper kind of success, one rooted in giving back and leaving a lasting impact. Clara, too, found joy in the project. It allowed her to honor her grandmother's memory while also stepping into her own potential. Together, they made a great team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses in ways that felt natural and effortless. As word of the foundation spread, they received messages from people all over the country, musicians, teachers, and fans of music, sharing their stories and expressing gratitude for the initiative. One letter stood out in particular. It came from a young woman who had grown up listening to her mother sing Wildflower Serenade. She wrote about how the song had helped her cope with loss and inspired her to pursue a career in music. Reading her words, Ethan felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. This was why they were doing this, not for recognition or fame, but to create ripples of hope and healing that extended far beyond themselves. The launch event for the foundation was held at the cafe, which had become a second home to both Ethan and Clara. On the night of the event, the space buzzed with excitement. Friends, family members, local artists, and strangers filled every corner, eager to celebrate the cause. Ethan stood near the stage watching as Clara greeted guests and thanked them for coming. Seeing her interact with people, radiating kindness and authenticity, reminded him of the woman he had loved. There was a spark in Clara, a light that drew people in and made them feel seen. When it was time for speeches, Ethan stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. Looking out at the sea of faces, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Tonight isn't just about launching a foundation," he said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "It's about celebrating the power of music to bridge gaps, heal wounds, and remind us that we're never truly alone. This journey has been one of discovery, not only of the connections between our families, but also of the ways love transcends time and space." He paused, glancing toward Clara, who stood off to the side, smiling encouragingly. "This foundation is named after a song that means a lot to me," he continued. "But it's not just mine. It belongs to everyone who has ever been moved by music, everyone who has carried a piece of someone they loved in their heart. Tonight, we honor those people. We honor their legacies." As Ethan finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Clara then took the stage, guitar in hand, and invited him to join her. Together, they performed Wildflower Serenade, their voices blending seamlessly. For Ethan, it was a moment of pure catharsis, a reminder that while some chapters of life end, others begin in ways we could never predict. After the event, as the cafe emptied and the lights dimmed, Ethan and Clara lingered behind, tidying up and reflecting on the evening. "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" Clara asked quietly, referring to her grandmother. "I know she would," Ethan replied without hesitation. "And I think Rose would be too." Clara smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You know, I used to think I was just a regular person living an ordinary life. But now I realize that none of us are really ordinary. We're all connected in ways we don't always understand. Ethan nodded, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Exactly. And maybe that's the point, to keep searching for those connections, no matter how unlikely they seem. As they locked up the cafe and stepped out into the cool night air, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it, with Clara by his side and the melody of Wildflower Serenade echoing softly in his heart. The foundation quickly became more than just a project for Ethan and Clara. It turned into a shared mission, a way to channel their emotions and energy into something bigger than themselves. As they worked side by side, organizing events, mentoring young musicians and spreading awareness about the power of music, they began to form a bond that neither of them had anticipated. It wasn't romantic at first, more like a deep friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. But as time went on, Ethan found himself looking forward to their meetings, not just because of the work they were doing, but because of how being around Clara made him feel. Clara had this way of lighting up a room without even trying. Her laugh was infectious, her curiosity endless, and her ability to connect with people unmatched. She reminded Ethan of someone he used to love dearly, someone who had brought color and warmth into his life. But she was also uniquely herself. There was a quiet strength in her, a resilience that came from losing someone close and learning to carry their memory forward. Ethan admired that about her, and it inspired him to keep pushing through his own grief. One evening, after a long day of planning workshops for the foundation, they decided to grab dinner together at a small diner near the cafe. Over burgers and milkshakes, they talked about everything: their childhoods, their dreams, the little quirks that made them who they were. Ethan discovered that Clara loved old movies, hated avocados, and always carried a notebook to jot down random thoughts. In turn, she learned that Ethan couldn't cook to save his life, had a soft spot for stray animals, and still listened to classical music late at night when he couldn't sleep. "You know," Clara said halfway through their meal, twirling her straw thoughtfully, "I never imagined I'd end up working on something like this. When Grandma passed away, I felt so lost, like a piece of me was missing. But now, I don't know. It's like I've found a new purpose." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I get that. For years I thought my purpose was tied to my career, to building wealth and proving myself. But none of that ever filled the emptiness inside me. What we're doing now, it feels real, like it actually matters." Clara smiled softly, her eyes meeting his across the table. "It does matter, and you matter too, Ethan. You've done so much for me, not just with the foundation, but with helping me understand my grandma's legacy. I don't think I could have done any of this without you." Her words caught him off guard, sending a wave of warmth through his chest. He hadn't realized until that moment how much he needed to hear them. For so long he'd been focused on giving, to others, to causes, but rarely allowed himself to accept gratitude or kindness in return. Sitting there with Clara under the warm glow of the diner's lights, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was okay to let someone in again. Maybe it was okay to trust that love could find its way back to him, even after all these years. As weeks turned into months, Ethan and Clara grew closer. They spent countless hours together, brainstorming ideas for the foundation, attending concerts, exploring the city during rare moments of downtime. Each interaction deepened their connection, weaving threads of laughter, vulnerability, and shared experiences into something stronger than either of them had expected. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through donations for an upcoming benefit concert, Clara paused mid-task and looked at Ethan. "Do you ever wonder if things happen for a reason?" she asked, her tone light but tinged with curiosity. "All the time," Ethan replied, leaning against a stack of boxes. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I guess I'm just thinking about how crazy it is that we ended up here. If I hadn't sung that song in the cafe, or if you hadn't stayed to listen, none of this would have happened. Doesn't that feel like fate to you?" Ethan chuckled, though there was truth in her words. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's just proof that when you least expect it, life has a way of bringing people together. Clara grinned, nudging him playfully. Either way, I'm glad it did. Her comment lingered in the air between them, unspoken implications, hanging like raindrops on a window pane. Ethan knew what she meant, that their meeting had changed both of their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. But he also sensed something else beneath the surface, a question neither of them was quite ready to voice aloud. That night, lying awake in bed, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Clara, about her smile, her laugh, the way she seemed to see right through him to the parts he tried so hard to hide. He thought about the woman he had loved and lost, the one whose memory still lingered in every corner of his heart, and wondered if it was possible to love again. Not to replace her, but to build something new alongside the love that remained. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the cafe early, hoping to catch Clara before she started her shift. When she walked in, bundled up in a scarf and holding a steaming cup of coffee, he greeted her with a nervous smile. "Hey," he said, stepping closer. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Sure," Clara replied, setting her cup down. "What's up?" Ethan took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about us, about everything we've been through together, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that you mean a lot to me, more than I ever thought possible." Clara blinked, surprise flickering across her face. "Ethan, I know it might sound strange," he continued quickly, afraid she'd misunderstand, "and I don't want to rush anything, but I can't ignore how I feel anymore. Being with you, and it makes me happy in a way I haven't felt in years, and I hope, you feel the same way." For a moment, Clara didn't respond. She simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "Of course I do," she said softly. "You've become such an important part of my life. I didn't realize how much I needed someone like you until you showed up." Relief washed over Ethan, followed by a surge of joy so intense it nearly knocked him off balance. He reached out, taking her hand in his, and squeezed gently. "So, where do we go from here?" Clara laughed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Well, I guess we figure it out together." From that day on, their relationship shifted. No longer just partners in a shared mission, they became companions in every sense of the word. They explored the city together, discovering hidden gems they'd never noticed before. A tiny bookstore tucked away in an alley, a park with a stunning view of the skyline, a food truck serving the best tacos either of them had ever tasted. They celebrated small victories like securing funding for the foundation, and supported each other through challenges, like dealing with difficult donors or navigating personal doubts. Through it all, the memory of the woman who had come before remained a constant presence, not as a shadow looming over them, but as a reminder of the love that had paved the way for what they now shared. Ethan often found himself reflecting on how far he'd come since that fateful night in the cafe. Back then, he'd been searching for closure, for answers to questions he didn't fully understand. What he'd found instead was something infinitely more valuable, a second chance at love, a renewed sense of purpose, and a family he never knew existed. One evening, as they sat together on a bench overlooking the city, Clara leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. "Do you think our story will inspire anyone?" she asked quietly. "I hope so," Ethan replied, wrapping an arm around her. "But even if it doesn't, I know it's already inspired me. You've shown me that love isn't something you lose forever. It's something that grows and evolves, finding new ways to exist in the world." Clara smiled, snuggling closer. "And you've taught me that it's okay to let people in, to trust that they'll stay even when life gets messy." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon and paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For Ethan, it was a perfect moment, one he wanted to hold on to forever. Because in that moment, Surrounded by the hum of the city and the warmth of Clara's presence, he finally understood what it meant to truly live again. Months passed, and the foundation grew into something neither Ethan nor Clara had imagined when they first started. What began as a small idea, a way to honor two extraordinary women, turned into a movement that touched lives far beyond their expectations. The cafe where it all began became a hub for local artists, hosting open mic nights, poetry readings, and jam sessions every weekend. People from all walks of life came together, united by music and the belief that art could heal even the deepest wounds. For Ethan, this journey was more than just a career shift, it was a transformation. He'd spent years chasing success, thinking it would fill the void left behind after losing someone so dear. But now he realized that true fulfillment came not from what you achieved, but from how you connected with others. Watching young musicians perform on the stage, hearing their stories, and seeing the spark in their eyes reminded him why he'd fallen in love with life again. And standing beside him through it all was Clara, whose presence made everything brighter. Clara, too, found herself changed by the experience. She had always been proud of her grandmother's legacy, but she never expected to become part of something that carried it forward in such a meaningful way. Through the foundation, she discovered a passion for mentoring others, helping them find their voice and confidence. It wasn't easy. There were days when funding fell short or plans went awry, but every challenge only strengthened her resolve. She often joked with Ethan that running the foundation felt like herding cats, but deep down she wouldn't trade it for anything. One crisp autumn evening, the cafe hosted its annual gala, an event celebrating the foundation's achievements over the past year. The room buzzed with excitement as guests mingled, sipping wine and admiring artwork displayed along the walls. Ethan stood near the entrance, greeting people as they arrived, while Clara helped finalize last-minute details backstage. Despite the chaos, there was an air of anticipation, a sense that tonight would be special. When it was time for speeches, Ethan stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding. Looking out at the crowd, he saw familiar faces, friends, volunteers, donors, as well as strangers who had heard about the foundation and wanted to support its mission. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "Tonight is about gratitude," he said, his voice steady, despite the lump in his throat. Gratitude for the people who believed in us when we were just starting out, for the artists who shared their talents with us, and for the communities that welcomed us with open arms. But most of all, it's about honoring the two women who inspired this journey. He paused, glancing toward Clara, who gave him an encouraging nod. One of them taught me the meaning of unconditional love. The other showed me the power of resilience and connection. Together they remind us that love doesn't vanish, it evolves. It finds new ways to exist in the world, touching lives across generations. The room erupted in applause, but Ethan wasn't done yet. Turning slightly, he gestured for Clara to join him on stage. As she walked up, guitar slung over her shoulder, the audience quieted, sensing that something important was about to happen. "This next song," Ethan continued, his voice softening, "is dedicated to both of them, and to everyone here tonight who believes in the magic of music." Clara adjusted the microphone stand and strummed the opening chords of Wildflower Serenade. For a moment, the melody hung in the air, fragile and haunting. Then Ethan joined in, his voice blending seamlessly with hers. Together, they sang every word with raw emotion, pouring their hearts into the performance. The room fell silent, save for the occasional sniffle or sigh. When the final note faded, the audience erupted into cheers, many rising to their feet. As Ethan and Clara took a bow, hands clasped tightly, Ethan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. This moment, this culmination of months of hard work and healing, was everything he'd hoped for and more. It wasn't just about the applause or recognition. It was about knowing that they had created something lasting, something that would continue to inspire long after they were gone. After the gala, as the cafe emptied and the lights dimmed, Ethan and Clara lingered behind, tidying up and reflecting on the evening. "Do you think they liked it?" Clara asked, stacking chairs against the wall. Ethan laughed softly, shaking his head. "Are you kidding? They loved it. You crushed it up there. Clara grinned, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. We did it together. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Her words caught him off guard, sending a rush of warmth through his chest. He crossed the room and pulled her into a hug, holding her close. You're amazing. You know that? She rested her head against his shoulder, sighing contentedly. So are you. They stayed like that for a moment, letting the quiet of the night wrap around them. Outside, leaves rustled in the breeze, and the distant hum of traffic provided a soothing backdrop. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt right with the world. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Clara continued to grow closer. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They argued occasionally, like any couple. But it was real. They learned to navigate each other's quirks, to communicate openly, and to lean on each other during tough times. For Ethan, it was a reminder that love wasn't about finding someone flawless. It was about choosing to build something beautiful despite imperfections. One chilly December morning, Ethan woke up early, unable to shake the feeling that today was going to be different. He slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Clara, and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. As he waited for the machine to brew, he glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. Today marked exactly 1 year since the night he'd first heard her sing Wildflower Serenade. A smile tugged at his lips as he thought about how much had changed since then. Back then, he'd been lost, weighed down by grief and uncertainty. Now he felt lighter, freer, as if he'd finally found his footing again, and it was all because of her. When Clara wandered into the kitchen a few minutes later, wrapped in a blanket and rubbing sleep from her eyes, Ethan greeted her with a kiss. "Happy anniversary," he said, handing her a mug of steaming coffee. She blinked, confused. "Anniversary of what?" "The day I heard you sing for the first time," he replied, smiling. "It feels like a milestone worth celebrating, don't you think?" Clara laughed, shaking her head. "Only you would call that an anniversary." "Well, it changed my life," Ethan said earnestly. "So yeah, it deserves some recognition, ain't dear?" Leaned in, kissing him softly. "Fine. But next year we're celebrating something less random." "Deal," Ethan said, pulling her onto his lap. "But seriously, thank you for everything." Clara rested her forehead against his, her expression softening. "Thank you, Ethan, for believing in me, for letting me be part of your life." They sat like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun rise outside the window. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of their home and the promise of a new day, they both knew they had found something rare and precious. Looking back, Ethan realized that none of this would have happened if he hadn't walked into that cafe on a whim. If Clara hadn't decided to sing that song. If fate, or whatever force, guided these things, hadn't nudged them toward each other. Life had a funny way of working out sometimes, leading you down paths you never expected to take. But maybe that was the beauty of it. You didn't have to understand every twist and turn to appreciate where it led you. And for Ethan, it had led him here. To a woman who made his heart whole again, to a foundation that gave him purpose, and to a future full of possibilities. As he held Clara close, listening to the sound of her breathing, he whispered the words he'd been carrying in his heart for months. "I love you." She smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "I love you too." And just like that, the circle closed. Not perfectly, not without scars, but complete nonetheless. Love had found its way back to him, not as a replacement for what he'd lost, but as a continuation of the story he'd been living all along.